All right, folks, we got Dylan Janzen in the house. Welcome to the Alliance Group podcast. We've got an awesome guest today, Dylan Janzen, all the way from sunny Nebraska.
Sunny, not this time of year. No,
Getting a little chilly in Nebraska around November time. Dylan just flew in yesterday, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and arrived here in Atlanta, and we are happy to have him here as a guest. He's actually a very special guest because, Dylan, you are a 2023 Living Benefits Ambassador for Alliance.
I am, yes. I'm very excited to be one.
Yeah, so we actually chose, many agents applied for this prestigious position. We chose your project because we really, really liked the idea of working with farmers and ranchers specifically. And this kind of niche that you have, you grew up on a farm, correct?
Yes, that's right. Grew up on a farm in, near Aurora, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up with two older brothers, little sister. Actually, my dad's a fourth-generation farmer, and my oldest brother will be the fifth-generation farmer.
So. Wow. So you literally grew up on a farm, waking up, doing the chores, all that stuff.
That's right. Yeah, maybe not as Hollywood as, you're probably picturing. But,
right.
It's definitely in the blood. It's definitely a lot of pride wrapped up in farming. So, that's what's been important to me, and it's a part of my life. Even as my wife and I, we live in Omaha now, but farming is kind of something that you really don't get rid of it. So even though we live in Omaha now, it's something I feel very attached to, and I'm very proud of growing up in that environment.
Well, sure, it's in your family bloodline. So how many generations did you say?
So I actually had to do a little research to find out, but the fourth generation.
Wow.
In the U.S. at least. So
right.
Before that, I'm a little unclear on. So we just did our ancestry.com. So we'll find out if we can go back how many more generations, but it wasn't on this continent, I don't believe.
So since the Jansens have been in America, they've been farming.
As I understand it, yes.
That's fantastic. There's a really unique kind of set of problems that farmers and ranchers can come across that you can actually help with. And this was something that we really loved about the project of trying to figure out a way to kind of connect with your audience. There's very specific needs that they have that you can solve. And we're going to talk about living benefits. There's obviously, certain risks that farmers and ranchers have that can be addressed with living benefits, life insurance. But really, when you get deeper into it, it usually revolves around planning, which is what you're trying to help farmers and ranchers do, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So talk about some of those specific challenges that you can help with that farmers and ranchers that are out there for them that might that they might not even be aware of.
Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of background, so I started my practice in Omaha, Nebraska, and we now have offices in Omaha and Wichita and Kearney, Nebraska, but really my focus has been small businesses.
Right.
And so,
which really a farm is a business.
Exactly. Right. So a lot of the same problems that my clients were having in Omaha really translated, or even those problems were elevated when I thought about, my family at home and the farmers and ranchers that I knew from back, in central Nebraska. So being able to meet those needs and help them plan to avoid some of these, what in our industry are very common mistakes that business owners can make. It's been a pleasure to be able to kind of go back home and be able to work with those same people that I grew up around and help them kind of avoid those issues and protect those families and those businesses.
Sure.
That's been a very fulfilling part of my career.
So let's kind of jump into this and let's talk about some of these problems that might be out there. Give me an example of a planning problem, and then how you can help solve that.
Sure. So there's so many different layers to a business, right? So whether you're talking about in the operation today, so if you have yourself as a farmer or rancher, you're very active physically with your business oftentimes.
Of course, you're working the farm, right?
That's right. So the statistics that come out year after year, they don't get any better, all right? Like the cancer rates, heart attacks, strokes,
yeah,
those things are happening more and more often, and it seems like younger and younger.
Yeah.
So
and that's among the general population.
That's right.
But farmers included, and sometimes actually farmers specifically.
That's right. Yeah. Right. So some of the things that you're exposed to on the farm can actually exacerbate some of those risks.
Yep.
And being able to protect not just yourself and your family, but also protect your business, so that if something happens and you're laid up and you're having to recover, that rehab process can take years.
Right.
And having a plan that's going to help your business recover or keep on running while you're recovering is very, very important. And a lot of people don't realize how efficient of a solution these plans really are. It just takes some intentionality to get these things figured out.
And some education, which is obviously what a big part of your role is to educate your client base on, living benefits life insurance is basically what you're describing. We're going to get more into the need for life insurance for farmers and ranchers. But specifically just the living benefits part of it. Those of you who are listening might actually, know already that, Alliance Group, we are the leader in living benefits life insurance. It's a new kind of life insurance, right? That you get protected for all the reasons that everyone knows that life insurance is needed to protect you, but it also lets you get that money while you're still alive if you get those things you were just talking about: heart attack, stroke, cancer. So it doesn't cost any more than the old kind of life insurance, but you get that extra layer of protection, which, as you're saying, is so important for somebody like a farmer who, if I'm a farmer and I have a heart attack, I'm not going to be out working the farm for, maybe months.
Right.
So you need to have that influx of cash to either help you, hire someone to work the farm, bring in other people, or just to replace the income that you lost. Right?
So I grew up on our family farm. To me, it felt very big. Now with a little bit of perspective, we're a smaller family farm. And I grew up watching my grandpa and my dad really partner the operation. If one of those two people was out, the other one would have to cover, but it was too much to do by one person by their own. Right. There's a lot of farms and ranches, though, that maybe the owner that isn't that involved in the day-to-day operations, or they become more like a manager of the operation.
Right.
In both cases, the risks are different, but it's a similar issue that can arise, right? Because maybe you have a certain farm hands, or you have key persons that are working on that operation, and being able to protect yourself if something happens to them as well becomes very, very important. As any business or small business knows, those important people in your business, they are not easily covered for or replaced, right? It takes so long to learn the intricacies of every business, because every business, every farm, every family is very unique.
Different dynamics. Absolutely.
And
I want to different as fingerprints. I mean,
exactly.
There's no kind of template, right?
Well, and I want to give Alliance Group a lot of credit. I've been in the industry now for about 8 years, and as a financial advisor, we do a lot with a lot of different things, right? Mutual funds, portfolio management, annuities. Life insurance was always kind of that thing I cared the least about.
Sure.
But having this new angle, this living benefits angle on it, has really changed the way that I look at life insurance with these benefits for my clients. And now it's a staple of every client that I have, is making sure that they're protected and their family's protected. I always say a good retirement plan should have some guarantees. Every good business plan should have some guarantees.
Absolutely.
And we're able to do that with these types of benefits.
Right. So you have obviously the life insurance, the living benefits as something that can definitely, that's low-hanging fruit that I think every business owner needs, but especially farmers and ranchers. Let's talk a little bit more about that planning process when it comes to not only making sure that you're covered if something happens, like cancer, heart attack, stroke, something like that, or an unexpected death, God forbid. But let's say that none of those things happen. What's the plan as far as what's going to happen to the farm when somebody passes away? How is this farm going to be passed on to the next generation in a way that is financially efficient and tax efficient, and also that kind of takes into account the family dynamics that you were just referring to, and doesn't alienate anybody or create any strife within the family? These are all things that that you specialize in and that you can help with, right? Dylan?
So, and I think I bring a pretty special perspective. Small business, especially with farms, or everybody's different, but you talk about the math and science, right? The taxes, the estate planning, things like that. They can all feel very left brain, very mathematical. But there is, especially with farming, because we talk about the generations, and small business can be no different. Generations of people owning this business and how it's been passed through the family, it becomes very emotional at the same time.
Yeah, of course.
So navigating those family dynamics when you have, a farm as it passes through generations, there become more and more hands that are involved, and making sure that you protect those relationships by doing that planning so that you don't have any rough breakups and ugly transitions that can actually tear apart the business or the farm altogether, or
the family, right?
Exactly,
which is what you don't want. I mean, we were talking about this before we got into the podcast booth here, and you take that example of you have a farmer who has, let's say, 2 sons and a daughter, and you got 2 of them who are really interested in working the farm. They love it. They want to take over and continue the farm, and then you've got one son who isn't that interested in doing that. He wants to do something else. You have to make sure that you plan properly for that situation. Can you kind of walk us through some of the dynamics that you have to be thinking about in that scenario?
Yeah, and the scenario that you laid out talks about 3 different kids, but really it's so hard to talk in generalities about something that is so unique to family, right?
Sure.
But we want to even talk about discussing how do you, if you have a child who is maybe more of a free spirit and wants to,
go to Paris and make art or something, right?
Wants to pursue their musical career or something that, is just a little more artistic, maybe a little less dependable.
Sure.
Being able to protect your kids even from each other, and maybe even from being in a position where they are unprepared to manage the type of assets or resources that they're going to be handed off or left with.
Right. So in that scenario, you've got 3 kids. You might say, well, just split it 3 ways. But the kid who wants to go to Paris and pursue a music career.
And splitting it 3 ways, as simple of a solution as that may sound, that means very different things. You can split ownership rights. You can split, a dollar amount of resource. So you might split up the resources, but it's in equal sections. Or, kind of my favorite approach is really taking this on an individual by individual basis when you are looking at an estate plan or a transition, is looking at each child and say, what's best for this child?
Right.
And just finding what feels equal to you, because it's your decision, right? You don't want to be handcuffed to any, typically this is what we see.
Sure.
I like to encourage people to throw typical out the window and do what's right for you.
Right. The reason you have a planner is because you don't have to worry about what typically people do. We're going to help you figure out what you and your family want to do.
And
especially you.
And that takes planning. It takes working with professionals. It takes, working with, I always prefer working with good local attorneys that have history in your area and they kind of understand some of these dynamics. Working with good CPAs, working with a good financial planner, just to make sure you have all your bases covered. I'm a very growth-minded person, and I was very much raised that way by my folks. So looking at how we can improve every single year, every single step. When you look at a good legacy plan or a good estate plan, I like to follow the rule, always leave things better than how you found it.
Exactly.
And being able to prepare whoever that next generation is, right? If it is family, great. If it's somebody else, that's great too. But making sure that whoever is taking care of it cares about it.
Right.
Because it's small business, farm, ranch, it really doesn't matter. You're going to have an emotional attachment to that business.
Of course.
And making sure that feels right. We talk a lot of math and science in this industry, but paying very close attention to the heart and what the heart wants, I think is very, very important, because a good plan is going to meet the needs of both, mind and heart.
And these things can be so complicated. And part of what you do is you help to kind of simplify it to where everyone can understand, this is what we're putting in place. You said this, so this is what we're going to do. And just kind of being able to kind of sort through all of this, the financial aspect, the ownership aspect, the tax aspect, and the family dynamic kind of relationship aspect.
And I
right?
think a lot of resistance that I see about people who don't want to plan is I think there's a lot of fear that people think that a plan means that it's in stone, it's stuck, right? Like we have to make these decisions too soon and we don't like what we have. A good plan is going to evolve as time goes on, right?
And should.
It absolutely should, because where you are today, especially when your kids are going through life, between your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, a lot changes, obviously, right? So what's right, but if something happens to you soon or sooner than expected, you need to have a plan in place sooner and later.
Right.
And that plan should evolve with you. It's not something that you set it in stone and put it in a safe somewhere and you forget about it.
Yep.
That's something that needs to be reviewed, maybe not annually, but when transitions happen in the family,
Sure.
Marriages, divorces, new members of the family or adoptions, things like that, you got to take those things into account and make sure that your plan is up to date.
No, it's funny that you're talking about this. Literally this morning before we left the house, for some reason or another, my wife and I were talking about our estate plan, and we were saying we did take the step of setting one up. Oh gosh, this is 7 years ago. And we have we did the whole thing. We went and we have a whole will, and all that stuff. And we were just talking this morning, like, we need to go meet with that guy because so much has changed since then. We're in a new house. We have another kid. We have, several things that have changed with regards to our financial circumstances. And it's funny that we're bringing this up now. To your point, we need to go and get in touch with our estate planning guy immediately because we need to update a lot of things. However, having the current plan that we have, while not ideal, is much better than if we had no plan in place.
Right.
So you do need to update these things as you go on, but the number one most important thing is get a plan in place.
Right.
And then it absolutely can change and should evolve throughout the years, but having something in place is always better. 100% of the time.
Life moves very fast, and it seems to move faster as we get older, right?
Yep.
But it's, as soon as you start a business or you get married, typically you need to go ahead and lay that foundation, right? Because you can always build on your foundation as things do become more complicated and as maybe, your business does better and resources increase and more people are involved in the family, you have kids, then kids get married and then they have kids and things just get more complicated. But laying a good foundation, it's not that you have to swipe it off the table and start over every time there's a change.
Right.
It just means you want to lay a foundation that you can start from and then we can build up as time goes on.
Absolutely. It's really important stuff. So, Dylan, we've been kind of talking this whole time, and obviously I've been bringing in farmers and ranchers because this is the kind of that is your specialty. That is where you're from. Those are your people. And obviously you have, kind of a specialized background that helps you help them. But this works for all business owners. We were kind of talking with any of your conversations that you're having, you can almost substitute the word farm or ranch for business, and these same principles apply, right? So it's not just farmers and ranchers that could and should be reaching out to you and utilizing your services, because any small business owner could benefit from your services.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't think this is any secret that there are way fewer farmers today than there were even, 10 or 20 years ago. Really what we're seeing is a lot of the small family farms are getting gobbled up by the more industrial farmers and things like that, especially on a nationwide scale. Now, where I'm from, it's mostly still small family farms in that area, but those are the trends that we see across the country. Some of the scary statistics that we see, or not, maybe scary is a little dramatic, but things that make me sad because of the values that I had from growing up in the family farm, is if you look from a person, call them grandfather to son, or grandfather to daughter, grandfather to daughter or granddaughter,
right?
2 generations, you see a 90% turnover of family businesses. Wow. So it's about only 10% retention from family businesses between 2 generations.
Wow.
Which, again, from someone would be the 5th generation in a line, that's an astonishing, especially from a farming community, that's an astonishing turnover of ownership, of people changing hands, and just companies and businesses not able to survive those
The transition,
transitions, right?
right.
And that typically comes from a lack of planning. Is
Yep.
obviously markets change, technology changes, everything is always evolving, but
And there is the possibility that just none of the kids were interested, or the
For
farmer
sure.
or the business owner just wanted to sell it because that was
Right.
the plan. But you have to think, especially in farming, that's not going to be the majority of the cases. Usually,
It's-
these are family. They would prefer to pass it down.
and of course, speaking from my own experience, may be limiting to what most people feel from similar backgrounds to me, but my friends and their families, there was very much a value of continuation in that operation, in that farm, and feeling connected to something like my grandparents had it and their parents had it, their parents had it.
Right.
Feeling that connection is it's a pretty special connection, and
Right.
being able to, I think that's where I get excited about being able to help farmers and ranchers, is I get to step in and kind of help enforce and kind of create that success
Right.
that I grew up valuing, right? Growing up valuing those connections. Family's very important to me, as we keep bringing this up.
Of course.
Business and family, it's cool when those two things go hand in hand, but you have to protect them.
Yep.
Because that's where, like we mentioned, the family dynamics, and you can't, you don't want to, there's a lot of different a lot of ways to skin a cat or whatever you want to say, but
Right.
people don't necessarily want to stay in that field, in that industry, but it's special when they do.
Right.
And so if they're going to, let's make sure that that's that the family can support that person with an attitude of, gratitude and excitement, and that there's not this ugly tearing apart of the family fabric.
We were also talking about this going in. It doesn't always have to be financially equal. It can be what so let's kind of go back to my example. We're going to simplify it a little bit, actually. Let's just say there's a son and a daughter of a farmer, right? And the daughter loves farming. She loves it. She wants to do that going forward. The son is not interested in doing that. Let's say that the farm is worth $5 million. It doesn't mean necessarily through your planning that we're going to have to figure out a way to compensate the son for $5 million to make it quote unquote financially equal, right?
Right.
Because the son might be perfectly happy saying, look, if you give me $1 million, she can have the farm. That will be totally fine. I will feel happy with that. So that's the kind of you have to kind of get in there and learn the dynamics.
Equalization plans, and I hesitate to even use, I don't want to use any words that spin people into a political type narrative, but equal doesn't necessarily mean equity, as far as when you're trying to make sure everyone's taken care of in these terms, right? So you betcha there's going to be some people that look at things and they want dollar for dollar, but as the decision maker and as the person working with your team and working with your planners, you got to find the solution that's going to work the best for you. Right. And it's probably impossible to make everybody happy.
Right.
But I know one example was within the plan that we had built. Part of it was if there was anybody who tried to break out of the barriers of that trust, then they would forfeit the entire trust itself. So it was more like hey, this is the deal.
Right.
So you either take it, leave it. Doesn't really matter how you feel about it.
Right.
Every family's going to be different, right? But making sure, I very much value flexibility in a plan. We mentioned how planning needs to evolve with time, but also bringing in flexibility, making sure you're thinking about different variables that seen or unseen that might.
And this is all your specialty. Right. These are all the things that you kind of help people figure out. Real quick, Dylan, let's talk a little bit about the potential negatives of not planning. Right? What we've talked through, several examples. What might be the dangers that someone is risking if they just don't do any planning at all and just never really think about these things and just say, hey, things will work themselves out? Right.
So basically, I tend to categorize planning and solutions for, what kind of plan do we have for today during for the client's working time on the operation, and how do we make sure that goes as smoothly as possible?
Right.
And then there's also planning for a transition. Right. So those two things kind of fall into two different camps. Working with lack of planning for someone who's currently in the business and operating the business. Look at some kind of income, ensure your income is kind of a quotable way to look at it, where if you become sick or hurt, you're able to back yourself up or back your operation up with enough money that you can either hire
financial
someone.
Products.
That's right. Yep. So with living benefits, you can actually build a plan where if you do get sick from a critical illness, or you get hurt, or you become unable to complete 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, basically become disabled, then you can actually access from a pool of money tax-free to kind of keep your business up and running, or to provide income for you and your family.
This is the immediate protection. This is protecting your business as you're working it.
That's right. Yep.
Absolutely.
So you can really take a lot of the what ifs out of your day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year by having one of these simple plans in place. We probably don't do enough talking about how inexpensive a lot of these solutions are.
Absolutely. People are always shocked. They're like, wait, they just assume it's going to be really expensive to cover this big risk.
Well, because you take something simple like life insurance, and someone says, well, they pay $100 a month for their life insurance. Okay. Well, now we're talking about a critical illness, a chronic illness, a disability plan, all wrapped into the same account. Most of my new clients are shocked to see that we're usually saving them money by making these kinds of changes. So they're getting more and paying less for it. It doesn't sound like that's not the way it's supposed to work.
Right.
That's
but
what
if you
we're
had a
seeing
standalone
today.
life insurance policy, and you had to buy a standalone critical illness policy and a standalone chronic illness policy, those things add up. Whereas we can wrap all of that into one product.
So I actually I've got quite a few years in the health insurance industry. So if you do, these are the most competitive companies that are in the country, and you do a comparison of a critical illness policy, a chronic illness policy, disability plan, you kind of bundle those things up, you're talking about probably a factor of 1 to 10 from a living benefits policy to actually building up all those different coverages.
Wow.
But I know people all day long that they package their health insurance with all these things from companies that market very well on television, right?
Yeah.
They do a very good job marketing, and so they buy a bundle of these things that are costing them hundreds, maybe even $1,000 a month, when a living benefits plan is going to do 10 times the coverage for about a tenth of the cost in a lot of cases.
It's incredible. It really is a fantastic solution, not just for farmers, ranchers, business owners, but just families, families in general, whether they're running a business or not. It makes a lot of sense.
Well, and if you look at, again, I tend to be a statistics guy. I like my numbers, but 60% of home foreclosure, 60% of home foreclosures are from somebody in the family getting sick. So it's not necessarily enough to just cover the person who might be bringing in most of the income. It's really important to cover the other members in the family.
Right.
Because what's going to happen is when your wife or your husband gets sick or your kids get sick, it's going to pull you out of working on your business, right? Or working in your business. So when that happens, it's very important that you have some extra resources, again, maybe to hire someone to cover the extra help that you need, or maybe just to help out at home, to help with the medical costs. Every situation is different, but understanding how, when those things happen, really the math and science goes out the window, and it's really just about doing the right thing for your family, right? So being prepared, again, back to planning, to make sure that you have a plan in place, we can ensure the success of your operation. I see a lot of times someone, if they get pulled out of the business for 6 months, it's almost like starting over.
Yeah.
So the difference can be, hey, returning to your business as it was, or even better. Yeah. Or having to restart. It's a pretty drastic spectrum of where you could be depending on level of planning.
So it's just there's a whole multitude of ways that you can help not only farmers and ranchers, not only small business owners, but also families.
Absolutely.
Really just think about these things. It's planning is so key and so important. So in your opinion, why is it that people are so hesitant to just, rip the Band-Aid off, sit down with you, get the planning done, get it squared away so that they can go back to not thinking about it?
So I think there's a couple different things, and again, everybody's different. I think one thing, this is a very sensitive topic, for sure. I think a lot of people are almost embarrassed sometimes that they don't have a plan in place. Like they might be very far along in their career and their life, and they think, man, I never did any planning.
Right.
So sometimes I think there's a little bit of embarrassment, which is
silly, but
it's silly. It's understandable,
Yeah,
though,
it's
because it is a
understandable.
serious topic. I think the biggest reason, though, is I think the industry as a whole has a pretty bad black eye for honestly the way that it's treated people and the way that it's conducted business for probably 40, 50 years, honestly.
Sure,
right?
and also just the what's the word I'm looking for? It's like the public perception when people think of insurance or life insurance. You know, we've mentioned life insurance several times throughout this podcast. You know, they think of Groundhog Day and Ned Ryerson, right? They think of that annoying, like kind of sleazy, like, hey, fast talking kind of sales
Bet you
guy.
could use some more, couldn't you?
Right?
Yeah.
You could use some more, right? And I think that perception is something that all of us kind of have to overcome because it's just what's out there.
Well, and I think it's a dichotomy because the way that I tend to look at it is, again, the industry has a perception of a very negative perception from the public, right? And it's a perception of product pushers and people that are just trying to sell something to make a commission, right? I find that as an opportunity for the good professionals in this space to really be that solution,
differentiate
and that planner.
themselves from those people,
right? So a lot of times I've even had had some meetings and some visits with potential clients, and they're like, "Aren't you going to sell me something?" I'm like, "No, like."
That comes later.
We don't need.
First, we have to figure out what the problem is before we can prescribe the medicine.
I don't know anything. I don't know anything about what your needs are until 2 or 3 appointments in this, and then we're going to start to understand kind of a picture of, hey, where are your vulnerabilities, and what are we going to need to kind of cover up those gaps and make sure you and your family are taken care of. But
it's like there's that saying, Lee Duncan says it all the time: prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. Right. And what I think where the industry, quote unquote, I guess, earned that reputation is a bunch of people going out there trying to prescribe medicine without even knowing what the symptoms are.
And to give the most grace and benefit of the doubt to those professionals, that's often how they're trained.
It's very true.
So it's kind of a top down. The companies themselves, depending on what company you work for, they've got quotas, and in order for them to meet their numbers, feed their family, get promoted, whatever it is, they're told they have to push something.
Right.
So I see it all the time. I see people pushing stuff that it should be part of a plan. It's not something that you just push on every client that comes in the door and gets their car insurance from you, right? Something like that. So being a part of the side of the industry, and there's a lot of great people in this industry.
Sure.
I'm very fortunate to work with like you guys at the Alliance Group and Five Rings Financial. I've met more quality type of planning. So I kind of differentiate with like planners versus salespeople.
It's very true.
There's a lot of great planners. And I think that's a side of the industry that's growing and expanding. And it's awesome to see. It's not so much just the solo broker that does a really great job. It's now an industry of very good independent
and you being an
advisors.
independent broker who you have complete control over which companies you choose to do business with, which solutions that you choose to incorporate into your practice. That's also a huge advantage of working with you, right? You're not an employee of XYZ insurance company that has a quota.
Right.
That, you are kind of deciding which companies you choose to do business with and which solutions.
Well, and I think that's nice because it actually brings a level of accountability to the carriers and to the financial firms that they have to do the things the right way. Otherwise, the brokers and the independent advisors, they don't have to represent their products. So if they stop doing the right things and maybe the trust diminishes a little bit, we can quickly go to a new solution, a new carrier that's going to do things the right way. Now, we haven't had any of those issues, fortunately. But,
we do have excellent carriers at Alliance.
Absolutely.
And people that are putting those solutions in place the right way, like you, Dylan.
That's right.
Dylan, thank you so much for joining us today. We could keep talking forever about this stuff. But I really do appreciate you coming and sharing your expertise with us. And guys, if you're out there and you're a small business owner, you're a farmer, you're a rancher, this is the guy you need to talk to make sure that all of your planning solutions are taken care of and that your business and your family are protected as well as possible. Dylan Janzen, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Listen to this interview and more on the Alliance Group podcast.